Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you here this morning. As I said earlier, it's Mother's Day, and that's the subject that's on my mind a little bit this morning. I'm sure there's a lot of activity going on across the nation in light of Mother's Day, and a lot of people calling the mothers, paying attention to their mothers. I know many of you know I work with a lot of the small telephone companies in rural areas, and we regulate those at the Public Utility Commission in Austin. And every year it's always a little bit of a phenomenon when the commission gets its reports. The highest phone calling, long distance calling day of the year is Mother's Day. And so the phone companies have to go to extra effort to open up their phone lines late in the day on Sundays, usually between 5 and 9 p.m., to make room and try to create enough capacity there to handle all the Mother's Day calls that take place on this day. So that's a good sign, and that's a good sign that not only that are we all close to our mothers, and we all have special fittings for our mothers, but that's in honor of the Lord's commandment that we honor our fathers and mothers. You know, and I find that there's no limitation on that commandment. Doesn't mean while they're just alive, we're to honor our fathers and mothers always. And the Lord tells us that it's the one commandment that He gives us that has a blessing to it. It says, so that your days on the earth you may live long, have many days on the earth. It's the only commandment that comes with a blessing. The rest of them are do's and don'ts. It's the one very positive commandment of honor your father and mother, that your days may be long on the earth. You know, we're told that to die is gain, and so we know that there'll be a time when we're supposed to come home, and we're not supposed to dread or worry about that, because we know we do better. But the Lord knows us. He knows us well. None of us most of the time don't want to die. And in fact, that's why He tells us in those 10 commandments about honor thy father and mother. That's one of the rewards you get for doing that, is that your days are long on the earth. Mother's Day was started in 1870 by a lady up in Boston to honor her mother. She had a little party in honor of her mother in May. And then in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson issued a presidential proclamation specifying that the second Sunday in May would always be Mother's Day, and we've been doing it ever since. Now, I know the greeting card industry was glad to see that, as was the flower industry and probably the candy industry, because they've made a lot of money out of it. But, you know, you can't say enough the importance of honoring your father and mother, because it is a commandment, and we know that mothers are special to us in many ways. We've got so many wonderful examples in the Bible of the importance of mothers. We know Moses, his mother, she put him out on a little boat that he wouldn't be killed, and he was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, and then the actual mother of Moses ended up being the maiden to come in, and the nanny to come in and raise her own child and nurse her own child. We see all the way through there the importance of mothers in the Bible. Even in I believe it's the 19th chapter of John, that Jesus, when He was on the cross, He talked to his mother, and He made sure that His natural mother was taken care of after He knew He was going to be gone from the earth. So there's a tremendous amount of examples in the Bible about mothers, and I hope to mention one of them to you specifically here in a moment. But in 2 Timothy, I believe it's beginning in verse 5, the Apostle Paul is writing to Timothy, and right off the bat he spells out, I recognize your faith, and I know you got it from your mother Lois and your grandmother Eunice. He's acknowledging that the mothers had a whole big role to play. Mothers do have a big role to play. They are the glue of our families. They're the glue that keep our families together. They're the ones that provide the love. They're the ones that provide our basic instruction. If you noticed in this world, even when you see people that are making announcements, and it always happens with them like it happens with athletes more than anybody else, great men always acknowledge their mothers. Great men recognize the importance that mothers have played. I remember, Earl Campbell from Texas that won the Heisman Trophy. When he got his Heisman, he broke down in tears on national TV, thanking his mother for what she had meant to him. And first thing he did when he got his signing bonus with the NFL, he went and built her a new home in Tyler, Texas. And it showed the old house, the old shack she was living in. He built her a brand new 3-bedroom house, 2-bath, right next door to it, and she didn't tear the old one down. She wanted to always see the comparison that what her son had done for her. For us. You know, Elvis Presley, I grew up in the era of Elvis Presley. He was the big hero of our days, the rock and roll hero. And of course, in some of the things he did early on, they couldn't show on TV because they felt what he was doing was vulgar, and a lot of people thought a lot of his singing was that way. But you know, when he finally made money, the first thing he did, he bought his mother a brand new Cadillac. She didn't have a driver's license. But he bought that, and she had it up front, and other people had to drive her around in it. That's the first thing he did. You'll see everybody, not everybody, I shouldn't say, but most people that are successful will acknowledge their mothers and the roles that they have played in their life. Now, mothers are not perfect. We know that. We all look back on our mothers, and I do on mine. And I know I did this last year, and I'm going to do it here again in a minute. I remember all the perfect things about my mom. You know, and she wasn't perfect, but I remember all the good things about her, all the good times and fun times I had with her. But I made a list again as I was thinking of them kind of last night of some of the things that I remember my mom saying, and I'm sure I've added to it from what I've heard other mothers saying, but this is the part where I always have fun with. Mothers, you know, of course, are able to read our minds. You know, they've raised their kids and they know them, and they read our minds. Most of the time they know what we're doing even before we get ready to do it, especially if it's bad. They have eyes in the back of their heads. They know when we're doing stuff. And, you know, and when you don't want your mother to know, you get real quiet. And it seems that's the time when your mother knows something's going on, when you get real quiet. I always got unhappy with my mother because she put a curfew on me. She didn't let me stay out very late at night. She knew me pretty well in that regard. And always, you know, and I would always question, you know, well, why? Why can't I stay out longer? Why can't I do this? Why can't I go with my good friends at nighttime? And usually the answer was God had a lot of logic to it because I said so. I heard that a lot. Here's some other things I heard. You're going to eat that and you're going to like it. Wipe that smile off of your face or I'll wipe it off for you. Beds are not made to jump on. Yeah, they are too, but you better pray that comes out of the carpet. If you two are going to kill each other, go do it outside. My brothers and I heard that one a lot. Did you brush your teeth? Did you wash your hands? Did you flush? Do you just live to annoy me? Don't make me come in there. Don't talk with your mouth full. Don't pick your nose in public. I guess it was okay to pick it at home. Look at me when I'm talking to you. And here's the last one I'll give you that you'll all know, and I'm not even going to finish it. I'm going to start it, and I'm going to let all the moms finish it. Before you go out today, put on clean underwear just in case you get in a wreck, have a wreck. That didn't ever make any sense to me, but, you know, I'm done enough that the first thing they do is cut all the clothes off of you, so it doesn't matter. The mother I want to focus on this morning is one I hadn't heard used, and I want to try to focus on it a little bit this morning. And that she was a mother, and she was a known mother, but she was not known for her virtue. And I think she had more virtue than what we give her credit for. This was Bathsheba. Bathsheba was a mother, the wife of David and the mother of Solomon. And the Bible story on her starts out pretty bad. You know, she had this affair with David, this adulterous affair. And as a result of that, I don't want to go in all the great detail of that, but as a result of this affair, she had a child, and the child, the adulterous affair David had with her displeased the Lord greatly. And so they had that child, and that child, we know, died shortly after it was born, and it grieved David tremendously, and I know it had to grieve Bathsheba too. Bathsheba is not one that we normally think of about her virtues as a mother. And I want us to look at this a little bit because I think I found some surprises in looking at Bathsheba. You know, I think what Bathsheba tells us is, I hope you'll see, is that we think of her as not being perfect because she was blamed a lot for the affair with David, and I think she was blamed unfairly and have been by all of us readers of the Bible for a long time. She was blamed unfairly, but she had a lot of good virtues that are recorded in the Bible that we don't talk about very often. And she had tremendous influence on the kingdom and on the work, in her work in behalf of the Lord. First of all, we know I'm in 2 Samuel chapter 11. And that's where we see that, David didn't go out like he's supposed to out to war, and he saw Bathsheba bathing on the rooftop, and he lusted after her, and, and he ended up having an affair with her. But verse 3 says, and David sent and inquired after the woman. He wanted to know who the woman was, that he loved the sight of her and lusted after her. And he was told, that's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam. Now, I never paid much attention to that, but I want us to talk about Eliam in a moment. Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Now, we know that David ended up calling her over and having an affair with her, fell in love with her. She ended up getting pregnant because of that affair. So David had to handle that. So David took Uriah, her husband, had him placed on the forefront of the battlefield, and put him as David said, in the heat of the battle, put him up the worst where the fighting is the worst, knowing he would get killed, did it on purpose and had him killed, not directly, but set him in a place where he knew he would be killed by the enemy. So David was accused effectively of murder. He had Uriah murdered because he deliberately sent him to a place where he knew he would get killed, so he'd get him out of the way. Got him out of the way so then he could marry Bathsheba. We know that he married Bathsheba, and as they were having this child, we know that the prophet Nathan, I want you to remember Nathan too. Nathan came to him, prophet to him, and gave him this parable about the rich man that went and stole the poor man's little, I believe it was sheep, and the prize sheep, and took it and used it for himself. And he said, what should you do? And David said, well, that man ought to be killed. And Nathan said, well, you art that man. Nathan is the one that confronted him and told him. The Lord sent Nathan to confront David and tell him the great sin he had committed. And so that's how then the Lord became displeased because of that affair, and the Lord backed off and let the life of that small child of David and Bathsheba be taken. We know that though the Lord forgave Bathsheba, if we look over here just a few chapters over in chapter 12 of Samuel, verse 24, after the baby had died, their first baby died, it said, and David comforted Bathsheba, his wife. First of all, the Lord recognized that marriage. Even though it was began in adultery, he recognized that marriage. The Lord forgives. He forgives. We talk a lot about the rules of marriage and divorce and those type of things, but the number one theme of the Lord is forgiveness. And that's what I hope we see in Bathsheba. A lot of us don't feel like we're the best parents, and I certainly don't know that I failed in many ways as a parent. A lot of you mothers may too, but we see that the Lord is tremendously forgiving, and the Lord can take someone who's had a skeleton in their closet, as we would say it today, and turn and make them a great contributor to the Lord's cause and someone that we ought to sing the praises of, and I believe that's Bathsheba. And I hope that you will be surprised like I was when we see one of the things that Bathsheba did during her lifetime. But the Lord blessed that, and he blessed her, called her, referred to her as his wife. And we know that they had another child. David went into her and lay with her, and she had to bear a son, and they called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. The Lord blessed them with a son. Now, we know David was contrite and repented from that sin he did, and I'm sure Bathsheba did too. But the Lord came back and blessed Bathsheba to bear the son who became the wisest man in the history of the world. And we see his wisdom passed out in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and the Songs of Solomon. Especially if you go read Proverbs, you'll see all the wisdom. We quote from that a lot about if you want to know about how to live life, how to deal with your spouse, how to deal with your kids, how to deal with money, how to deal with all the problems, how to deal with the excesses of life, the addictions we have, whether it's drugs or sex or liquor or gambling or whatever, go read Proverbs. It's in there, and it'll teach you how to deal with it. So the Lord richly blessed her. But that's what I want to talk about is her blessings. I told you I wanted to talk about her father. Her father was named Eliam. That's verse 3 of chapter 11. And her husband's name was Uriah. Well, first of all, I want to say Bathsheba came from a good family, and she married a good man. If you go over here to 2 Samuel, chapter 23, Start 23, verse 8. It tells about David's mighty men. And I have spoken on this in the past. When David became king, he had a great army, but he had a core of mighty men, his key fighters. He'd be kind of like our Green Beret or our Navy SEALs or somewhere. These were his best men, and they were referred to as his mighty men. There were 37 of them. He had 37 men that were mighty men, and they're spelled out by name in the 23rd chapter of 2 Samuel. But they list them here, and I won't go through the whole list, but you get over here at verse 34, and he tells us the name of the first man, which I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try. But then in the second half of that verse, Eliam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gileonite. Eliam, David's father-in-law, had been one of David's mighty men, was one of his best fighters. Bathsheba's father, and Eliam was the father-in-law of David, and he was also one of David's mighty men. And these were his men that he trusted the most. Not only were they the best fighter, those are the ones that trusted the Lord and loved the Lord. Bathsheba came from a godly family. And we know that back in those days, there were a lot of arranged marriages. And so Eliam, when he did arrange that marriage for his daughter, he arranged her to marry, as we know, Uriah. If you read on a little 3 verses further down, the 39th verse of 2 Samuel 24, the last of his mighty men, of David's mighty men, was Uriah the Hittite, 37 in all. 37 of these men, Uriah is the last one listed. Both Uriah and his father-in-law and David's eventual father-in-law were both mighty men. Those were the men that David trusted the most. David picked a good wife when he picked Bathsheba. She had great heritage. But up in verse 34, it talks about Eliam was one of his mighty men, and that's the father of Bathsheba. But it said he was the son of Ahithophel. Ahithophel. Who in the world is Ahithophel? If we'll go back here and see if I can locate it here. Yeah, Ahithophel, if you go back to 2 Samuel 15, these are all hidden gems in the Bible. We've got to go through little hidden treasures, jewels we've got to go through and pull out. But in chapter 15, verse 12, it says, And Absalom, which was David's son, sent for Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor from his city, even from Gilo. Ahithophel was David's counselor. He was the older man. He was the grandfather of Bathsheba. So David had himself surrounded with good men, and we find out that Bathsheba's father was the counselor to David, that her father was a warrior for David. Her grandfather was the counselor for David, and her husband was also one of the great warriors for David. Chapter 16, the very last verse, verse 23, And the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, tells us how good a counselor was Bathsheba's grandfather, was as if a man had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel. When you listen to his counsel, it was like it was coming directly from God. Look at the legacy that Bathsheba came from. She came from a great family. She wasn't any, low-class citizen or whatever. She was not only a beautiful young woman, she attracted David, but she had this great legacy. She came from a godly family. She had a godly father, a real godly grandfather. She had a godly husband, and both of them were mighty warriors for David. So she came from a good family. That's looking back up her family. That's looking to where her legacy is coming back. Let's look at the legacy now that she left. In chapter 3 of 1 Chronicles, it talks about the descendants of David. In verse 5, it says, he gave all of David's wives, and David had like 8 wives, I believe, over a period of time. Verse 5 tells us about the sons that he had with Bathsheba. And these were the sons born to him in Jerusalem, Shemiah and Shobab, and Nathan and Solomon, 4. Those were the sons of Bathsheba and David. Solomon, but it also mentions Nathan. Bathsheba and David named one of their sons after Nathan, the prophet, that had come and confronted David about his problems. Not only did they come from a godly family, they recognized the error that they had done, and they named one of their sons Nathan. One son, Nathan, and another of their sons was Solomon, the 2 sons they had. So she had a great legacy backwards that we just talked about. let's look going downward about these two sons. If you go over here to the book of Matthew, the heritage, the lineage of Jesus Christ. In Matthew, 1, and these are the parts that we hate to read because they're so hard. He was the son of so-and-so, and he begat so-and-so. These are hard, but let's look at verse 6. And Jesse begat David the king, and David the king begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah, and then Solomon begat Rehoboam. So in this, it references Bathsheba here, son, but in Matthew 1, it lists the legacy, the heritage of Christ, the lineage of Christ, comes directly from Solomon, David and Bathsheba, comes directly through Bathsheba. The Lord blessed her to be one of the ancestors of Jesus himself. Go with me, if you have your Bibles, over to the book of Luke. And again, this is the first part of Luke chapter 3. We don't read these very often because they're real difficult. But the genealogy of Jesus. Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as it was supposed, the son of Joseph. Now, we know, why does it say, and it was supposed? Because we know he wasn't actually the son of Joseph. He was to the public, but he was born in the virgin birth of Mary. Now, Joseph more or less adopted him as a stepfather. Everybody thought he was his natural father, but the scriptures recognize that. But we know that really the lineage of Jesus came through Mary in a natural sense. It didn't come through Joseph. But over in Matthew, it talks about all the way down to Joseph, from Solomon and Bathsheba all the way down through Joseph. But here in Luke, it starts telling the genealogy again of Jesus, and you're going, wait a minute. A lot of these names don't match up with the one over in Matthew. Is one of them wrong? And he goes through here and it tells him being the son of that, but verse 31, it said, which was the son of Maliah, which was the son of Menon, which was the son of Matthiah, which was the son of Nathan, which was the son of David. The genealogy of Luke takes Jesus through David, through Nathan, not Solomon. And you go in here and read here more. Every contemporary, every study of the Bible says this is the genealogy of Mary. Bathsheba was in the lead. I mean, she fathered two sons, both of which were in the genealogy of Christ, one through Joseph and one through Mary. She fathered two sons, both of whom became lineage for Jesus. It's pretty good criteria for the Lord to honor, isn't it? Pretty good way for the Lord to honor this woman who sometimes we don't give the honor that we should. But she turned out to be the father of Solomon, who was in the lineage with Joseph. She also turned out to, the mother. She was the mother also of Nathan, who turned up in the lineage of Mary, which is given to us in Luke. And that's the reason those two lineages don't exactly match up. They change with Solomon and Nathan on down. I told you, I spoke a little bit of this yesterday at the funeral, but we talked about the Proverbs, book of Proverbs, and we spoke about Proverbs 31. In Proverbs 31, it's well known, and I will use it yesterday, and it was used otherwise, talking about what a virtuous woman it is. And Solomon is given great credit for talking about this virtuous woman, and it's the perfect woman you have here. And of course, you think about this, you think about Solomon. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. How did he know which ones were virtuous and which ones were not? But his writing is great, and we follow it today. And he was, like I said, he was the wisest man in the world when he was writing. And he wrote all of the book of Proverbs. But let's go to chapter 31, and we know this virtuous woman begins at verse 10. Do we ever go back and read the first 9 verses? Let's do that today. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 1, which we never read. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. The words of King Lemuel. Now we know Solomon wrote Proverbs, and if you go do your history on Israel, you'll find out there was no King Lemuel, not anywhere in the history books. Turns out Lemuel was the name that, the kind of the nickname that Bathsheba gave to her son Solomon. She really took care of Solomon. If you go back and read 1 Kings, not only did she play this great role in the lineage, if you go back and read 1 Kings, she's the one that more or less kind of tricked David into going ahead and name Solomon king. When it came time to name the king, and Absalom and his other sons were off trying to usurp David in the kingdom, she went ahead and David hurry up and named Solomon as king. You'll see that. She more or less kind of tricked him. We see over there in earlier chapters in Samuel that the Lord appeared unto David and said, I'm going to pick the next king that'll last, and his throne will be last forever, and it'll be out of the lineage of David. And everybody assumes that's Solomon. But if you go through the rest of there, and you never see where the Lord designated Solomon to be the king of Israel. He blessed him, clearly blessed him, he loved him, and he blessed him. But you'll never see where the Lord named Solomon king. Bathsheba tricked David into naming him king. But you go back and read that when the Lord blessed David and said, the next great king of Israel will come out of your loins, come from you, and his throne will last forever. Was she talking about Solomon? Did Solomon's throne last forever? Out of the lineage of Solomon, guess who's down in there? A man called Jesus. Jesus was the next great king of Israel, spiritual Israel. He's our king today, and his kingdom lasts forever. That's who the Lord was talking about when he was talking to David about the king will come out of the king, and his kingdom will last forever, will come out of your loins. He wasn't talking about Solomon. He was talking about Jesus. We studied this one Wednesday night during our Bible study lesson. So Bathsheba played a great role in Solomon's life. Not only did she get him named king with David, and David was tricked into naming him king, and he turned out to be a great king, and the Lord blessed him in that because he made him wisdom and would give him all these books to write. But in Proverbs, go back to Proverbs 31, verse 1, the words of King Lemuel, we know that now to be Solomon, the prophecy that his mother taught him. Solomon wrote Proverbs, and he wrote the 31st chapter, but he said, this is not me. This is words my mother taught me. So the entire 31st chapter of Proverbs was actually written or dictated or taught. They came from Bathsheba. They came from the mother. The mother wrote this. And what she's trying to teach Solomon is, Solomon, you've gone off and you've married the Pharaoh's daughter. That's not who you ought to be marrying. You need to think about who you're marrying. And so she taught him these words, and Solomon said it was good advice. He didn't follow it always. I didn't always follow the advice of my mother either, but I know she was always right. Sometimes we don't do that, and that's what Solomon's doing. The entire 31st chapter of Proverbs was actually handwritten out by Solomon, but it actually came from Bathsheba, because he said, these are the words of prophecy that my mother taught him. This is what he writes about. He said, what, my son, he's quoting from his mother, Bathsheba, what, my son, and what the son of my womb, and what the son of my vows. She's named him, that's my son, is all of these. Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to those things that destroys kings. She's trying to give him advice. Solomon went off and married all these strange women. He married the daughter of Pharaoh. He married the daughter of the Lebanite prince because he had to do deals. He married the daughter of the king of Lebanon so he could get the cedars of Lebanon to help build the palace. He married the daughter of Pharaoh so he could get riches from her. He went through and he married the wives of about 7 or 8 leaders of all the countries around him so that he could bring them in. And it was a great tool. It was a great compromise because he brought in all these people that supported him because he had all their daughters in his household. But we know toward the end of his life, it destroyed him. They all had him worshiping pagan gods. So a lot of times his wife's got him in real trouble. This is his mother warning him about that. And he's putting it down here for us. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor princes strong drink. Don't let wine take control of your life, son. Don't let these strange women take control of your life. What were Solomon's 2 biggest weaknesses? Women and wine. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, guys? It's a great book to read. This is coming from Bathsheba. This is not coming from Solomon. This is a mother doing a teaching of her son. Did she have a little bit of a checkered background? Yeah. But she wasn't to blame for what happened to David. If you go back and look, when David saw her, he goes and inquires, and David was warned up front. Bathsheba didn't even know it. David was warmed up front. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah. She's the daughter of one of your closest friends and advisors, and she's also the wife of a man that has become one of your mighty warriors. David knew what he was getting into. He was the blame for this. And if you'll see Nathan, go back there and read where Nathan confronts him, Nathan puts all the blame on David, not any of the blame on Bathsheba. She's never mentioned. She has to suffer with the loss of a son, but after that you'll see Bathsheba did the work of a good woman, of a good godly woman. And all this chapter 31 is her words. It's not Solomon's. Solomon is transferring down what his mother taught him. It's clear he didn't always follow it like some of us don't do with our mothers. But she first is advising him about the strange women that he was bringing into his life. Then he says, it's not for kings to drink wine. Verse 5, lest they drink and forget the law. Lest they get drunk and forget the law. They don't know right from wrong anymore. Remember, Solomon had go pray to the Lord, give me judgment that I might discern right from wrong. And she's telling him, Solomon, you don't need to drink because then you lose your good judgment. You can't be a king. You don't know right from wrong. Lest you drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. You can't help out your people if you're drunk all the time. If you're drunk and drinking, you lose your judgment. You can't help out your sons, your daughters, your family. You can't help out the people of your kingdom. But do give strong drink to him that is ready to perish. If you have to condemn any man, or if a man's about to die, give him drink and let him get out of his pain. We do that today, don't we? When we put somebody on hospice, the word is you give them medication to keep them out of pain. That's what morphine is used for most of the times, get somebody out of pain. She already had that wisdom back then. If you got to put somebody to death, if you got a soldier on the battlefield, anybody that's about to perish, you do give them strong drink. Help them get out of the pain. This is not coming from Solomon. This is coming from Bathsheba. Give strong drink to him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those of heavy hearts. If you're grieving problems, a little bit of wine will help to calm them down. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. Then she advised him, open thy mouth, though, for the dumb in the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open your mouth for the dumb, the people that can't speak. That's just where we don't use it anymore. It's not politically correct, but deaf and dumb. Deaf, they couldn't hear. Dumb, they couldn't speak. That's what she's talking about. Speak for those who can't speak. That's the job of a king. That's the job she wants to tell him to do. Speak for those that can't speak. You're the king, but speak for the lowly. Take care of those people that can't take care of themselves. This is coming from Bathsheba to her son. She is doing the work of a mother. She's teaching her son how to live in the world, how to honor his position. You're a king, and act like a king, but don't forget to take care of those people that you serve. Because actually you serve them. Take care of those people that can't. Speak for those people who can't speak for themselves. Open thy mouth for the dumb in the cause of all such that are appointed to destruction. All these people are having trouble. They may be getting kicked out of their houses. They may not be able to feed their families. Speak for them and take care of them. Open thy mouth to judge righteously and plead the cause of the poor and the needy. He's the king of the country. We have trouble a lot of time. We don't think kings look down and see the people down below them. They don't see the people that are hurting. And this is what Bathsheba says, this is what a king does. A king not only acts like a king, doesn't drink too much, but he keeps himself sober so he can judge properly, so that he can speak for those who can't speak for themselves, and he can take care of the poor and the needy. Then she goes into verse 10. Then Solomon goes in this, but this is still her speaking, the entire verse. She says, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? And then she goes and lays out this wonderful model of what a wife should be. But she's writing this herself. This is written by Bathsheba. She said it to him. I'm sure Solomon actually wrote it down. But he goes through here and she tells all about it. About how her husband, a virtuous woman, how she deals with her husband, how she deals with her children, how she takes care, and end up she'll be praised. But what I want to point out to you is this was Bathsheba that wrote this. effectively. It's what she taught to her son. This is what mothers teach to their children, how to behave in the world, how to deal with the world. My mother taught me, I love chicken fried steak. My mother taught me how to fry chicken fried steak. I can't afford to eat it anymore. My mother taught me how to make my bed. My mother taught me how to wash my clothes. I don't do great at it, but I sort blacks from whites and then wash. It's not always perfect, but I wouldn't have known that if my mother hadn't taught me. My mother taught me if I go visit somebody, I should make the bed, and I shouldn't walk in with muddy shoes on a white carpet. Those are all things. You know, when somebody comes over to your house and you don't criticize them. You know, I could go to somebody's house, you know, Kim and Jim's house, and they could let me spend the night, and I'd get up in the morning and I could track mud across Kim's carpet. You know, and Kim's going to say, well, I know he's a preacher, but did his mother not teach him anything? That's what mothers do, and that's just what Bathsheba is teaching Solomon, and Solomon is passing it on to us. We don't ever go back and read verse 1 to see who wrote it. This was written by Bathsheba. She was a mother. She was a good mother. She came from a godly family, and the Lord blessed her. If you think you had some problems in this world, and you think, well, I'm not a very good mother, I'm not very good, and I haven't done good things always in my life, neither had Bathsheba. She came one of the greatest mothers of all, because the Lord forgives, and he blesses those that serve him. We serve a wonderful Lord, and may God bless all the mothers. Thank you very much for your kind attention.